Orange Democratic Movement
that is Raila who had won the election.
Tumeshashinda mara mingi, lakini muhimu ni kwamba Kenya ni kubwa kushinda sisi zote.
I told him because I know how cameras work, turn off the lights at KCC. Yeah. But he didn't do it.
On December 27, 2007, millions of Kenyans went to the polls to choose their next president. The election was expected to be one of the closest in Kenya's history. With incumbent President Mwai Kibaki facing a strong challenge from opposition leader Raila Odinga.
Sisi wanachungwa, tumekutana pamoja, tukamwambia Balala na watu wa Pwani, shikilieni mkia huko.
I am calling upon all of you
After the voting ended, the ballots were counted at polling stations across the country and results began making their way to the National Tallying Center at KICC in Nairobi. What started as an ordinary election, however, would soon become one of the most controversial political events in Kenya's history. Inside KICC, the ECK was responsible for receiving, verifying and announcing the presidential results. At the center of the process was the Commission's chairman, Samuel Kivuito.
Not be any excuse. I don't find any excuse because the whole purpose of introducing counting during at the polling station was to hurry up the process. And although I agree there was a challenge because this time there were more voters, the turnout was higher than ever before. That is no excuse for us to have to be here on a Saturday for elections we held on a Thursday. And we can't get our officers, I don't know. So, I don't know where they are. And so, we have asked the police to assist us to trace these people where they are, right?
As the results started coming in, Raila Odinga initially opened up a significant lead over Mwai Kibaki. The numbers being announced at KICC appear to suggest that the opposition leader was on course to win presidency.
No, I don't doubt the results. The ones I doubt, I'm saying I cannot understand why they have not come.
We could wait. We know that there is a time limit.
Media houses were also conducting their own tallies, and figures similarly showed Raila Odinga ahead. For many Kenyans watching from home, it seemingly increased likely that the country was about to witness its first change of government through the ballot box.
With those figures, the figure was 66,000. Don't tell that it came to 95,000. Honestly.
Yesterday when I spoke, I did not say I doubt anything. I did not say figures are being cooked. But I said by staying with the papers for so long, one would suspect.
But then the process began to slow down. Days after Kenyans had voted, the ECK was still receiving results. The delays raised questions because some constituencies that were geographically close to Nairobi had not yet submitted their final figures, while other results were arriving from different parts of the country. As the tallying dragged on, the atmosphere inside KICC became increasingly tense. Every result mattered because the race was extremely close and the direction of the election could change depending on the numbers that were still outstanding. Then the situation became even more complicated. Results from part of Mount Kenya region, considered a stronghold of President Mwai Kibaki, began arriving. As these figures were added to the national tally, Kibaki started closing the gap on Raila. The country watched as numbers changed. The candidates who had appeared to be comfortably ahead was suddenly facing a much tighter race. Inside KICC, questions are being raised about some of the results being presented as the delays surrounding the arrivals of others. The pressure on Samuel Kivuitu was enormous. He was responsible for overseeing the final stage of the tally and announcing the winner. But the process surrounding him was becoming increasingly chaotic. Politicians from both sides were at KICC demanding answers and insisting that the results be handled according to the law. Raila supporters wanted disputed figures to be examined and verified, while Kibaki supporters wanted the remaining results to be announced so that the tally could be completed. Among those present and closely involved in the unfolding drama were senior politicians and political operatives from both sides. William Ruto, one of Raila Odinga's key allies at the time, was among those demanding clarity over the results. The atmosphere inside the tallying center was tense, with politicians, journalists, election officials, and security personnel all gathered in the same space. The pressure was not only political. The entire country was watching the events unfold live, waiting to know who could become president. The media was also playing a major role. Television stations were broadcasting the tallying process to millions of Kenyans, while newspapers and radio stations were reporting on the results as they came in. Because the media's own tallies continued to show Raila Odinga ahead for much of the process, public expectations grew that he could be declared the winner. The situation became so sensitive that the government began expressing concern about media reporting, arguing that premature declarations of victory could increase tensions in the country. As the tally entered its final and most dramatic stage on December 30th, the situation inside KICC deteriorated further. Questions were being raised about figures coming from some constituencies, while members of the ECK themselves were divided over the process. The pressure on Kivuitu was intensifying, and the politicians surrounding him were demanding that he bring the process to an end. It was during this tense period that lights at KICC went out. The tallying center was suddenly plunged into darkness at a moment when the entire country was waiting for the final presidential results. The blackout came one of the most controversial moments of the elections. Questions immediately arose about what had caused it and why it had happened at such a critical point in the tallying process. Different accounts have been since given about the circumstances surrounding the blackout, and it remains part of the unresolved controversy surrounding the 2007 election. As confusion spread inside KICC, attention turned to Samuel Kivuitu. The ECK chairman was eventually moved away from the main tallying area amid heightened security concerns. According to accounts surrounding the events, police officers were involved in ensuring his safety as the situation became increasingly difficult to control. The chairman, who had been at the center of the tallying process, was no longer simply dealing with election officials and politicians. He was now at the center of a national crisis. At this point, the country was waiting for one thing: the official declaration of the winner. The tension was extraordinary. Raila Odinga's supporters believed that their candidate had won, while Mwai Kibaki's supporters maintained that the remaining results had shifted the election in his favor. The ECK was under immense pressure to complete the tally and make an official announcement. Then came the declaration that could change Kenya forever. Mwai Kibaki was declared the winner of 2007 presidential election. The announcement was immediately rejected by Raila Odinga and his supporters, who maintained that the election had been stolen. The declaration was followed by Kibaki's swearing-in ceremony at State House, which took place only hours after the disputed results were announced.
Natenda kazi zangu za uhalifu Jamhuri ya Kenya.
For many Kenyans, the speed at which the events unfolded only deepened the controversy. Questions continued to surround final tally, the disputed figures, the delayed receiving of results, the events at KICC, and the circumstances surrounding Kivuitu's final announcements. The country was left deeply divided, and the political dispute quickly turned into a national crisis. Violence erupted in different parts of Kenya. Communities that had lived together for years were suddenly caught up in political and ethical conflict. More than 1,000 people lost their lives, while hundreds of thousands were forced to flee their homes. The crisis became one of the darkest periods in Kenya's post-independence history.
In 5 minutes they came, they told us to migrate. Before we migrate, those people have arrived. They are cutting our people, killing our people. Even now, right now, there are people who have been burned there, killed there. They have not even been taken to the hospital. They are still there.
As the violence continued, international intervention became necessary. Former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan arrived in Kenya to mediate between Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga. After weeks of negotiations, the two sides reached a power-sharing agreement. Kibaki remained president while Raila Odinga became prime minister. The agreement helped bring the immediate political crisis to an end, but it did not answer the fundamental question that had divided the country: who had actually won the 2007 political election.
It is threatening to get completely out of control. It is bad enough as it is, but it will get even worse. We have all seen the pictures and images. So we must do everything possible. Every group, every individual, every institution must do everything to try to end this violence on the issue. Oh, yes.
The controversy will continue for years. The Kriegler Commission, established to investigate the election, concluded that the electoral process had become so deeply flawed that it was impossible to determine with certainty who had won the presidential election. Samuel Kivuitu himself later made statements expressing uncertainty about the outcome, adding another layer to the mystery surrounding the election.
Our data was showing Raila had won with 1.8 million votes.
Then, years later, came another significant voice in the debate. Media proprietor SK Macharia, who was closely connected with the country's media landscape during the 2007 election, made fresh claims about what he believed had happened. Macharia said that the data available to his media organization showed Raila Odinga winning the election by a significant margin. In more recent accounts, he went further, alleging that events took place behind the scenes involving election officials and the handling of results of the Mount Kenya region. Macharia has alleged that he was picked from his home at night and that returning officers from the Mount Kenya region were held somewhere while their returning forms were taken. He further claimed that he was taken to his office where he found people whose identities he did not disclose and alleged that figures were changed. According to his account, the results available to his organization showed Raila Odinga winning by approximately 1.8 million votes. These remain Macharia's allegations and have not been established as fact by official findings. But his claims have once again reopened the debate about what happened during those final hours of the 2007 election. They raised questions about the results that arrived at KICC, the delays in the tallying process, the role of returning officers, the dramatic change in the numbers and the circumstances under which Mwai Kibaki was eventually declared the winner.
2007. Kibaki won, and we had data, complete data, that it's Raila who had won the election. I know some people will run away here, but let them run away because we agreed with the Getahi. I'm speaking to the soul of Getahi. Here is only the body. And we had agreed whoever dies first will reveal this information for the country. So that's why I'm doing it. Our data was showing Raila had won with 1.8 million votes. And I was picked from my house at night, and all the returning officers from Mount Kenya region were held somewhere, and their return forms taken, and I was taken to my office. I found some people, I'm not going to mention their names, and we changed all those figures, and Kibaki won the election against him.
Nearly 2 decades later, the events of December 2007 remain deeply embedded in Kenya's political history. The story began with millions of Kenyans peacefully casting their votes, but it ended with disputed presidential results, a chaotic tallying process, a controversial declaration, a rush swearing-in ceremony, and the worst outbreak of post-election violence the country has ever experienced in decades. And at the center of mystery remains KICC, the delayed results, the political demanding answers, the ECK commissioners questioning the process, the figure that changed the direction of the race, the blackout that plunged the tallying center into darkness, the movement of Samuel Kivitu, the final announcement declaring Mwai Kibaki the winner, and years later, the allegations made by SK Macharia. The question that has remained in Kenya ever since is simple, but perhaps one of the most difficult questions in the country's democratic history: who really won the 2007 presidential election?